back to another episode of Questions with Crocker with me, Dr. Crocker, and my husband, Shane.
What's up, brother?
Have you been watching way too many TikToks?
No, they just keep popping up on my thing.
And do you know what it means now?
Slowly figuring it out.
It does make me laugh because I have no idea. But obviously there's a whole generation of people that very much know what's going on with that.
That guy's got like millions of followers.
And he like streams games or something like that,
so,
right?
yeah.
That's crazy. Now, I can't imagine sitting and watching somebody like play video games.
I have zero desire to do that. But I do watch golf on YouTube.
I was about to say, you watch people, and then I watch people like do surgeries, and I watch veterinary shows where they're doing what I do every day. So I guess it makes perfect sense. Our son actually watches some Minecraft shows where they do that, and they show you tricks and they show you different things. So I'm so glad our cat has decided to clean himself right now next to me. Animals do not care. No. They do not care what you have going on. All right. So this is a podcast that is called Questions with Crocker. And if you're new here, it's based off questions that are submitted by people or questions that I get frequently online. I'm an emergency veterinarian, and we also own a general practice together. And you are a
business owner today.
And a partner extraordinaire with our children, holding the fort down half the time. So we enjoy getting your questions. We need your questions. So you can listen to us on Apple or Spotify. You can leave a review, but you also can leave questions on social media at Questions with Crocker. I always say this at the end, and I feel like maybe it gets lost. So I'm trying to put it earlier on so people know.
Get after it.
You also can watch us on YouTube if you would like. It's early in the morning today, so we're trying to wake up still. I'm still nursing my coffee, but we're excited to be here. I actually have something interesting to share. We did an episode on the podcast, and we talked a little bit about non-competes and obviously related to veterinary medicine. But as of yesterday, the FTC came out with a ruling apparently that would ban non-competes, like across the world, across the United States. So when they actually were being interviewed about the ruling, they mentioned like all the groups of people that it would help. And they talked about fast food workers, nurses, but they specifically also mentioned veterinarians. And their reasoning was that it prohibits people from being able to make more money. It basically helps the corporations, and it's not helping the individual worker. So I want to know your thoughts on this, because we had some interesting thoughts before. And I think this is just the start of a long battle, because a lot of those people with a lot of money are now going to come out and say, you're hurting us, and they're going to have lawsuits, and it's going to be a big thing. But what do you think about the FTC finally saying, hey, non-competes, not okay, and supposedly going to be banning them?
I think they probably overstepped their jurisdiction. I'd be surprised if it stands. 1. 2, I think it's going to affect some things that nobody's really looking at. As an example, acquisitions. We acquired a company 6 months ago that, in theory, the people we bought from have a non-compete, so they can't go sell their company for a huge multiple and then turn around and start the same company and keep their customers, right? You're going to see a lot of companies that don't want to acquire companies if they can't lock the competition up where they can't compete against them and immediately steal their business. So people that are looking to retire and sell their business are probably going to have a harder time getting big multiples because of the non-security that the acquirer is going to have. So I think there's going to be some downhill effects of this that people aren't really thinking about that could potentially hurt growth in the economy.
But on an individual basis, I will say that I know people that had to go out of the state to be able to practice.
Yeah, but non-competes most of the time are contractual, meaning you agreed as an employee to sign that non-compete for whatever reason. Maybe you got more money up front. Maybe you got a bigger contract than you're getting from somebody else, but you contractually agreed to that non-compete.
So you're saying they knew what they were getting into.
100%.
I would say that the detractors saying non-competes are not fair basically are saying that people don't understand how much they'll be locked down. And I can see both sides of it. I do agree, though, that I know people that it has really affected their career in a very negative, dramatic way. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's
Well,
going to be
again,
interesting
it's
to
an
see it.
effective decision they made, right? I mean, we make decisions all the time that have negative effects on it. You just have to figure out a way to make adjustments, and you live the fight, right? So, again, if there's companies that you go work for that it's mandated that you have a non-compete, I probably wouldn't go work for that company if I'm not going to be 100% happy, right? It's a contractual obligation. It's the decision you made as an employee to go work somewhere. That's just my personal opinion.
No, I mean, I can respect that opinion and see where you come from. And I also think coming from being not actually like practicing in the industry and being like a business owner, I think your perspective, you have a different one because it affects you very differently. And when people think of it, they think of it more as the massive corporations against like the little underdog. And that's kind of the picture that is painted when you have non-compete discussions. And that's really the vocal people out sharing their story and talking about things. So
what I think is interesting is the Chamber of Commerce is one of the most outspoken right now that is probably going to go file, lawsuits on the behalf of really small business owners, because I don't think people are realizing how much it's going to affect small business.
And I don't know if the ruling specifically was talking about like individuals versus like people that are business owners. Like I really don't know more specifics on it, but I do think it's something that will really change a lot of industries overall. And we're going to have to wait and see how much those changes are good versus bad.
I think there's a lot of negative impacts that people aren't thinking about. And a good example would be sign-on bonuses, right?
Yeah.
I'm not giving somebody a big sign-on bonus if I can't lock them up for 5 years, knowing that they're going to continue to work for me. I'm going to have a lot of time, energy, and training these individuals. I'm going to have a lot of money given to them up front in a sign-on bonus. I'm not giving that if they're not going to continue to be around.
And probably the devil's advocate in me wants to say that people need, like veterinarians specifically, so bad they will still give those sign-on bonuses.
I'd be very surprised.
I'm just telling you. And instead, it would have a sign-on bonus that is contingent on them working so long.
Well, that contingency is the non-compete.
No, it's not. The contingencies are usually just a time frame that they work there. And then if you leave sooner than that, you have to pay it back. And usually with interest, like you have to pay back more than you actually took. But it's not always tied to the non-compete specifically. It's more tied to the length of time you're going to stay there after. So I think that there's such a need, especially in certain areas, like specialty wise, that people might still be paying those big bonuses. But I do think it's going to shake things up. And I always do like a good shakeup in an industry that has historically not had significant change. And as practice owners, I mean, we have already kind of said non-competes aren't as big of a deal to us as a small business owner because we just feel like we want people that want to work with us. But I do think
I think it's very specific to different industries. It's very specific to different businesses. If you have a salesperson, right, that has a big impact on business, especially small business,
right?
Because a lot of times they have a very close relationship
with their
customers. So that salesperson now kind of is allowed to go out and sell their customers to the highest bidder, if you will.
That's true.
And that has big impact. Like you and I talked about with veterinarians, we really don't want somebody working for us that doesn't want to be there.
Right.
And yes, they have a book of business they would probably take with them, but it's not like in our area, it's not like a veterinary hospital on every corner. They're going to have to go miles away, 5 miles, 10 miles away. Not all the customers are going to follow them, even though they have a close relationship, right? So for us, it's probably not as big of a deal. But for some industries and some businesses, my tank business, it could be a big deal.
Yeah.
There's a guy we want to hire that's under non-compete that we can't hire.
Yeah.
But
it could benefit you, but also hurt you, which is interesting,
in
right?
that scenario, we could get that guy would be a huge benefit to us.
Yeah.
But the flip side is,
he
if he decide to leave, that business is probably going to follow him somewhere else.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Definitely something we're going to have to talk more about and just think about, especially even more as we're hiring.
The thing that I don't like is when government gets in the middle of free capital. That's the part that I don't like. And again, I look at it as a contractual relationship between an employee and employer, and they've agreed that I'm going to work here for X number of years for this salary with this potential bonus structure with this upfront money. And it's a contractual obligation. I'm not going to leave you in 2 years after you spent all this time training me, after you gave me this money up front, and go compete with you down the road. That's just my personal opinion.
Listen, I'm here for it. That's why I like talking to you about these things, because I think your opinion is based on your perspective and your experience. And then my opinions are obviously based on my perspective. And I probably have had more interactions hearing one-on-one stories of people that were very negatively affected and their mental health was very affected by some of these things. So I don't want to discount their experiences. And we have been lucky that we've been able to make job choices without having to really deal with this and have it affect us emotionally, financially, mentally. So definitely not here to say that anyone that feels very strongly about this is not right.
And we're also looking at it from a employer perspective
100%.
Where we want to take care of our employees and want to treat them right. And we want to have a good working environment for them.
Right.
We know everybody's not like that. And I can't sit here and pretend that.
Even if you know what you signed up for, did you really
know what was going to take place behind closed doors?
Yeah. No, I think that's valid. So we will see what happens with that. We will keep people updated on that. But it's definitely going to be interesting.
So my understanding is it becomes legal 120 days after the announcement or something like that. And then people could even still leave after that 120-day mark, even if it's in lawsuits, et cetera.
Because they could say, well, it's happened. And then even if it doesn't end up long-term happening,
that's right. There may be a window that people can still move. And again, we're not legal experts here. Don't take our advice.
But I feel like there might be some people in the C-suite who are sweating a little bit about this. Probably. Because it could have some big ramifications for some of these big veterinary companies. So we will see if the FTC non-compete ban holds or not. So moving on, I think that I had a couple interesting things that were asked on social media recently, and I thought that it would be good to address them. And it was more pet owners. So I made a video, and I have made this video before, and basically I have a syringe and I'm floating it back and forth, and it's showing what looks like blood, but the blood is not clotting. And I usually will put on the screen like it was a lethargic dog who came into the emergency room with a big belly. What is the diagnosis? And that may not seem like much information to go on, but for people that work in our industry, and especially if you work emergency or urgent care or in even general practice, you know that this is probably what's called a hemoabdomen. So do you know what a hemoabdomen is?
Clue.
Okay. So hemo, Latin is what everything is based off of. Hemo is blood. Abdomen is abdomen or belly. So it's basically blood in the belly. So never anything that you want to see, not anything good. I specifically have had almost one of these cases. It seems like a shift in the ER. Most recently, I had Jed, who was a middle-aged, mixed breed, cute dog who came in because he was just like moving slower, a little more lethargic. The owner said he hadn't eaten as well, but really didn't have a big belly, didn't have anything crazy. His gums were pink when he presented. His heart rate was okay, but they were like, there's just something not right to him. And this is a testament to owners like really paying attention. So I recommended a workup because really we didn't have a ton of signs to go on, like dog not feeling great, could be a million things. And they said, sure. So we did lab work and really, again, nothing dramatic on the lab work, a little bit of like an inflammatory leukogram saying there's inflammation in the body, but nothing specific. So we did an abdominal ultrasound. And right away, I could see there was a little bit of fluid in the belly, which shouldn't be there. And then we did see that there was a splenic tumor. Luckily, these owners had caught it so early that this dog wasn't bleeding so quickly that it was bleeding out. But just in the time frame it took us to run the lab work, decide next steps, go over estimates, he already started to look paler. So it was basically a ruptured splenic tumor that was bleeding quickly. And these dogs can die within a couple hours when this happens. So right away I said, this is a true emergency. Splenic tumors rupturing, absolutely true emergency. Basically, you have to decide if you want us to go in and do surgery, remove the spleen, or if you want to put him to sleep. There's really no in-between options with this most of the time because they are bleeding internally, and you can't stop the bleeding unless you go in there. And you do a couple things before you go to surgery. You check chest x-rays, make sure you don't see anything that has like spread to the chest. You do an ultrasound of the liver, make sure there's nothing on the liver. Did all that, everything was clear. I said, this is the ideal time to do surgery because he's stable. And most of the time they come in and they need blood transfusion and need all these other things. And they said, absolutely, let's try. So we did the surgery. I removed the spleen. I remember I was on shift. And so, you do the surgery, we recover the patient, and then a lot of times you leave. And I try not always to like look back at cases because I want to go home and just decompress and not be in my head about stuff. But he was one that his owners were just amazing, and he was such a sweet dog that I just kept kind of checking on his case. And I saw that he did really great in the hospital. He went home within a day and a half, didn't have any major complications. But then it's the waiting time to see what the spleen, what the tumor is, because it could be a totally benign tumor and you remove the spleen and it's curative, or it could be an aggressive cancer called hemangiosarcoma. So unfortunately, within, I think it was 5 days, it did come back. It was hemangiosarcoma. So we called them and told them, and they followed up with an oncologist. And after that, like as an emergency vet, you really don't expect to hear anything else. And most of the time, average time frame they live is a couple weeks to a couple months after that. But he's come to the ER twice since then. One time he came and they just wanted to say hi to me and thank me, which was amazing. You don't often get those visits in the emergency room. So I got to take a picture with him, see him, and he was doing really, really well. He was on Union Bio, which helps with preventing bleeding. And then most recently, unfortunately, he came back because he wasn't doing as well. And he'd gotten really lethargic. He had finished the chemo they were going to do, but he had developed liver nodules. It was spreading, which you cannot cure this cancer. But you can kind of keep it at bay. And so he came in because he wasn't doing good, and I took the case. And fortunately, he was a little anemic, but not greatly. He had a little bit of fluid in his belly, but it didn't look like anything was rapidly bleeding. So the owners decided to continue to monitor him, but basically set up an appointment, probably with lap of love, for at-home euthanasia within the next week or so. So that, all that being said, it is something that really, really sucks to deal with, because you know that even if you do everything you can to save this dog in the moment, a majority of these dogs are going to pass away within a couple months. And when you're telling owners what needs to be done, but giving them the prognosis, it really stinks to say, if you give me this money, I still can't fix your dog, but I can get you more time with him. And
there's no way to tell if it's going to be cancerous, but unless you remove it, right?
No. I mean, you could try to do an aspirate of it, but it's already bleeding and you have to go in there. So the best thing to do is to remove it and send the whole thing to the lab, and they can tell definitively what it is. And even if you do an aspirate, you have to send it to the lab. So it's going to take 2 to 3 days, and you don't have that time. That's a good question. So you have to just make a decision right away. It's not a cheap surgery.
How many of those turn into be cancerous versus non-cancerous?
That's a good question. So, and I don't want to get this wrong, but usually if they come in and they are bleeding already, there's a much higher chance that they are cancerous. If you find them incidentally, it's a much lower chance. The smaller the tumor is, it's actually, I think, statistically more likely to be cancerous and be aggressive, versus if the entire spleen is enlarged, that's usually more benign. So there's a couple factors you can kind of look at. And half of these you can't take to surgery because you take an x-ray of their chest and they have cancer in their chest already, or you take an ultrasound of the liver and they already have masses in that. So it's really frustrating because you know what it is, you know what you can do to help, but you can't like fix it ultimately. And I have a ton of owners that say, I'm in it to win it. Like, I know I just need more time with them. Let's do it. And we do that surgery all the time in the ER. But then I have some that just say, I'm not going to put them through all that, or, financially, that's a lot of money to not be able to fix them. And so they, elect to put them to sleep humanely. But the question I kept getting on that video was, how can I prevent this? And that is one of the hardest questions, because I would love to be able to say, like, oh, if you do A, B, and C, like, your dog will never get cancer and you'll never end up in the ER. And that's just not realistic. Now, there are a couple things you can do. They now have genetic tests for different cancer markers. And we know, especially certain breeds, this happens in more. So labs, I see a ton of Labradors, larger breeds in general tend to get this more. So you potentially could do the genetic marker test and see if your dog could have the marker. And then if they did come up as this is something, you could get like ultrasounds frequently. So you can monitor frequently to try to catch it like as early as possible, right? One of the other things you do is just ultrasound frequently. Some veterinarians with their senior exams recommend ultrasounds and x-rays of the chest because dogs and cats aren't going to let you know there's anything wrong until it's like really wrong. But I had a dog that I did a full ultrasound on for other reasons, and he came back 3 months later with a full-on bleeding splenic tumor. So it's so fast and aggressive that even if you do all the monitoring and all the ultrasounds, you still might not catch it. And even if you catch it and you remove the spleen early, microscopically, it still often has already spread. So ultimately, you really can't prevent your dog from having a splenic tumor 100%. And I think as a pet owner, understanding that eventually something is going to happen to your pet and you can't prevent everything is maybe something that people need to come to terms with a little bit. We love preventative medicine, but there's only so much that can be done. And even in people, like think about all the things that are available to people preventatively. And we still know people that have cancer and have other things, right? And you can even tell somebody like, I don't feel quite right. Something feels weird, and it still happens. So I would say to pet owners, they should enjoy their pets. They should spend time with them. They should do the preventative monitoring that their veterinarian recommends. You can sometimes catch this on routine blood work if you see like platelets are low or a little bit of anemia. But ultimately, there does have to be an understanding that we're going to lose our pets at some point in time, and you can't prevent everything.
Makes a lot of sense. And my head just went a completely different direction here.
Oh, gosh. What direction?
You hear a lot of comments about the increased cost of veterinary medicine and how it's continually on the rise.
Yes.
People probably aren't having this conversation 15 years ago.
No.
So I think there's a correlation between the increased cost in vet med, but also the increased amount of medicine and diagnostics and other things that people have the ability to do now that they didn't before. So I don't know. My head just went to historically 15 years ago, that dog probably comes in, it's got blood in its stomach, and you just automatically put it down.
100%.
There's no ultrasounds being done. There's no, let's go in and, take this out and send it off to get tested. I mean, it's just
blood transfusions, plasma transfusions, intensive hospitalization.
So yeah, I think the cost of healthcare for your pet is going up pretty substantial. But I think a lot of that is a direct correlation of what kind of medicine people are practicing today versus then as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, being able to offer people genetic cancer screens, that's a whole nother level for animals. We have monoclonal antibodies now.
And we hope that there's going to be, at some point, a drug that cures cancer or fights cancer or,
right.
or gives a pet another 30 years or, humans 30 years, So it's just going to continue to rise as medicine and the ability to do things like this increases.
And that is a reason that human healthcare has gotten so expensive, because people are able to live longer and there's more things to keep them alive. So that's actually a really good correlation and point out. And that is one of the hardest things in the emergency room. And I will actually tell owners this. There's a lot I can do. There's a lot I can recommend. Is it actually going to change ultimately what we do for your pet? Is it going to change my decision or my recommendation? If not, I'm going to tell them we can do all these things, but you don't have to do those things. And even with this, I will tell owners.
And again, it's the owner's decision. If they're like,
yes,
throw this kitchen sink at it, I don't care.
Yes.
That's the decision they made.
And I will tell people there's some owners that will do things that I would never consider doing for my pets, or financially, like, I don't know that I could afford it. And then there's some owners that, stop earlier than I would. So I can't make that decision for anybody. They have to make that decision based off of what will help them be able to go home and feel like they did their best. So some people will say, I have to try.
Yeah.
Like if I don't try, and even knowing I'm not going to cure them, like I have to try. I'm just not ready to say goodbye. I will support you, whatever you decide. The thing that's hard is when people want us to do all those things.
They just have nothing, no
and they
money. They
have
can't-
no financial
support.
resources. And that is what causes a large amount of burnout in veterinary medicine is, yes, we have all these things available to us now, but you would have two types of owners, right? I could have one owner that I say, we know that splenic tumors are really common in Labradors. We are going to recommend every 6 months you come in, we do, lab work to assess and make sure there's no anemia occurring. And we want to do a full abdominal ultrasound. And there's this cancer screen that we're going to send out yearly. This is what the best recommendation would be. And there are some people that would lose their minds over that. You're just trying to, upcharge me. You're trying to make money off of me. And then there's some people that would say, yes, I want to do all the things. I want to catch things as quickly as I can. And I don't know sometimes who is going to be who. So you don't want to not recommend things because you might get seen as being in it for the money, but you also want to practice best medicine and you want to do what the pet needs.
That almost needs to be part of a class in vet school, I think, like around communication. I think it's the veterinary's responsibility to at least talk about the gold standard, right? But do it in a way where people don't feel threatened or obligated they have to do it, but just aware that here are the options.
Right.
And, a veterinarian needs to be able to talk through all these options, but do it in a way where they don't make a person feel bad because of their financial constraints. Right.
And that is a tricky thing because you want people to have access to care. You want them to feel supported. And if you come in and say, this is what you should do, and it's $10,000, and they just say like, I absolutely cannot do that, it's just not fair to them. I don't feel like knowing they could do more, but they can't financially. So I always like to set the groundwork of like, what budget are we working with? This can range from here to here. Where are you more comfortable being before I make like hard estimates and really hit them with it? But I would, I know this is a weird thing, but I would love, I think Dr. Dave Nickel talks about this. He actually has a contract with pet owners. And when they come into his practice, like, it's a contract they read through, and it basically talks about their behavior, how they're going to act. And it also talks about like financially, the standard of care they're going to offer, the things that they're going to recommend, and that the owner is agreeing like that is also what they want for their pet. And I think it's a different way of doing things. And he's over in the UK. So, but I do kind of wish that I could take each pet owner and say, okay, for the year, what do you expect to spend on your pet? And preventatively, like how much do you want to do or not do? Because you might have the client that's like, I just want the vaccines. I might give heartworm prevention during the summer. And if something happens, we'll kind of see. And then you might have the owner that's like, and I have some of these owners that are, it's like, I want to do everything I can preventatively, all the screening I can. I want my dog to live their best life for as long as possible. And cost is not a concern. Like this might be the high end of my budget, but other than that, keep my card on file and let's just do the things. I wish I could determine that early on with pet owners that are coming to see us, because it would make it an easier conversation, not having to try to navigate, am I going to offend somebody? Is someone going to get mad I didn't mention something because I am assuming it's going to be financially too much for them? So that's a great point, because it has dramatically changed our profession, being able to offer so much, but also it being more expensive for pet owners.
Very interesting.
We're going to have to maybe dive a little deeper into that in a future podcast.
Agreed.
So back to the question, if you're a pet owner and you want to prevent your dog getting a splenic tumor, unfortunately, you probably can't prevent it completely, but there are some screening tools that you can use, most commonly at your general practice vet, some cancer screening tests, and also abdominal ultrasounds that maybe you could catch things early and do surgery and get more time with your pet. But that's it for the day. I think this was a good conversation. I like your little aside. Thanks for contributing.
I can't
Such
do a lot with abdominal, whatever we talked about.
Hemoabdomens, yeah.
Yes.
Now you know, though.
Now I know.
All right. Thanks, you guys, for listening. If you want to leave a review on Apple or Spotify, we'd appreciate it. If you want to email us any feedback, we would love that too. Go to Questions with Crocker and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and drop your questions there. And you have a wonderful day.
And don't beat me up too bad about my non-compete stance.
I can't even wait for the messages. Okay. It's going to be fine. Y'all have a good week. Thanks. Bye.